The message notification appears. Heart racing, you open it, convinced this connection is different from all the others. Had an amazing time last night. Can't wait to see you again. 3 days later, still no response to your follow-up messages. Your mind races through the evening, the easy conversation, the lingering glances, the seemingly genuine interest in your life. Yet now, silence. Complete radio silence. Ghosting, that uniquely modern form of rejection where someone simply vanishes without explanation, leaves a wound unlike any other. It's not just rejection, it's rejection without closure, without the dignity of an ending. Your mind fills this void with questions, self-doubts spiraling as you analyze every word spoken, every gesture made, wondering what fatal flaw you revealed that caused someone to disappear completely. What if there was a way to understand the deeper psychological currents that create these painful patterns? What if the secrets to forming lasting, meaningful connections have been hiding in plain sight for over a century? The revolutionary insights of psychoanalysis offer a surprising framework for understanding why some connections deepen while others mysteriously dissolve. Though never experiencing the unique pain of being left unread, the pioneers of depth psychology identified unconscious mechanisms that illuminate even our most modern relationship struggles. Our unconscious mind influences far more of our romantic experiences than we realize. That magnetic pull towards certain people, that ease of connection with some and awkwardness with others, that tendency to repeat relationship patterns despite our best intentions. These experiences aren't random, but signals from your unconscious mind, following maps established long before you started dating. Understanding these mechanisms doesn't just explain why connections form or dissolve. It can transform how you approach relationships entirely. When seeking to form deep, lasting connections, we often focus on surface-level strategies: the perfect opening line, the ideal date location, the right timing for vulnerability. But beneath these conscious considerations lie powerful unconscious forces that often determine whether someone feels inexplicably drawn to you or unconsciously compelled to distance themselves. By understanding these deeper mechanisms, you can create the conditions for authentic connection, rather than trying to force attraction through manipulation or pretense. I feel like I've known you forever. There's something about you that just feels like home. That sensation of immediate familiarity, of feeling instantly comfortable with someone you've just met, creates one of the most powerful foundations for connection. This experience often signals something more complex than coincidental compatibility. The unconscious mind constantly seeks to recreate emotional patterns established in our earliest relationships. When someone unconsciously recognizes elements of these formative connections in you, they experience an immediate sense of significance that feels like destiny rather than psychology. This recognition operates beneath conscious awareness. The date who feels inexplicably drawn to you may be unconsciously responding to ways you mirror important figures from their past. This isn't manipulation, but an inevitable aspect of human psychology. We are all unconsciously drawn to what feels emotionally familiar, whether that familiarity brought pain or pleasure. Consider a common scenario. Two people meet and experience an immediate sense of understanding. Conversation flows effortlessly. Silences feel comfortable rather than awkward. This powerful connection creates the sensation of having found someone uniquely capable of understanding you. What's often happening is a sophisticated form of pattern recognition, both people's unconscious minds identifying emotional dynamics that match their earliest experiences of significant connection. The unconscious doesn't calculate compatibility through shared interests or values, but through emotional resonance. If someone experienced inconsistent but intensely rewarding attention in childhood, they may be powerfully drawn to partners who mirror this pattern, offering unpredictable but exhilarating engagement rather than steady, reliable presence. Neither person consciously engineers this dynamic, yet both unconsciously participate in its creation. This pattern holds profound implications for creating deep connection. When you approach relationships with awareness of these unconscious mechanisms, you understand that chemistry isn't random, but based on emotional familiarity. The goal shifts from trying to be universally appealing to being authentically present, allowing natural resonance to emerge with compatible people rather than trying to manufacture false connection. I noticed you seemed quiet after I mentioned my ex. Is everything okay? Directly addressing moments of emotional disconnection represents one of the most powerful tools for deepening intimacy. Yet this approach contradicts one of our most fundamental psychological drives, the impulse to seek pleasure and avoid pain. When facing potentially uncomfortable conversations, many people choose avoidance over engagement, not from intentional distance, but from basic psychological self-protection. This avoidance mechanism operates almost automatically. The person who seemed fully engaged suddenly withdraws when the relationship requires navigating emotional complexity. Their unconscious calculates the discomfort of difficult communication against the relief of simple avoidance. Without conscious intervention, avoidance often wins. Dating situations frequently feature this dynamic. The relationship progresses smoothly until a conflict arises, a boundary needs discussion, or emotional vulnerability deepens beyond comfortable limits. One person attempts to address the issue directly, the other becomes increasingly distant, perhaps eventually disappearing rather than engaging with temporary discomfort that might lead to deeper connection. This avoidance isn't necessarily conscious calculation. The person doesn't explicitly think, "This conversation would be uncomfortable, so I'll create distance." Rather, they experience growing unease, a vague sense of pressure, and find themselves conveniently busy or distracted when opportunities for deeper conversation arise. The conscious mind provides rational justifications for what the unconscious has already decided: avoid the discomfort at all costs. Understanding this dynamic creates the opportunity for profound connection. When you recognize that discomfort in relationships isn't failure, but an inevitable aspect of deepening intimacy, you can create space for authentic engagement rather than expecting perfect harmony. By gently acknowledging moments of disconnection without accusation or defensiveness, you establish yourself as someone capable of navigating emotional complexity, a rare and valuable quality in relationship prospects. My father never really showed affection. I'm realizing I have the same hesitation sometimes. The psychological mechanism of transference, unconsciously projecting feelings, expectations, and patterns from past relationships onto current ones, creates both the greatest challenges and the most profound opportunities for connection. When someone reminds us unconsciously of important figures from our past, we respond not just to who they are, but to all the emotional associations they trigger. This transference operates without conscious awareness. The date who displays a specific mannerism, communication style, or emotional response that resembles a parent or formative figure activates entire relationship templates from the past. Your responses become shaped not just by the current interaction, but by the accumulated emotional history attached to similar patterns. Dating experiences frequently feature this dynamic. A potentially promising connection suddenly shifts when one person displays a trait that unconsciously reminds the other of someone significant from their past. The reaction may seem disproportionate to the current situation because it's responding to accumulated emotional history, not just the present moment. A common example: someone whose parent consistently dismissed their feelings meets a date who makes a seemingly innocent joke about their emotional reaction to a situation. Though objectively mild, this comment activates the entire emotional pattern associated with invalidation. The unconscious doesn't distinguish between past and present sources of similar feelings. The reaction is to the entire pattern, not just the current trigger. What makes transference particularly significant for creating connection is how consciously acknowledging its operation can transform its impact. When you recognize moments when your response seems disproportionate, you can pause to consider whether you're reacting to the present situation or to a familiar pattern. Similarly, when someone's reaction to you seems outsized, understanding transference allows you to respond with curiosity rather than defensiveness. This awareness creates the foundation for healing connection. By recognizing how past relationships shape current interactions, you can offer what many unconsciously seek, but few consciously understand: the opportunity to experience familiar emotional patterns with different outcomes. Someone who experienced emotional dismissal in formative relationships might unconsciously test whether you'll respond similarly. When you instead offer validation and presence, you create not just momentary connection, but the possibility of transformative relationship. "I really care about you, but I'm not sure I'm ready for something serious right now." Just as relationships deepen beyond surface engagement, many people deploy one of the most common self-protective mechanisms, creating artificial barriers to intimacy. While consciously desiring connection, the unconscious mind often fears the vulnerability genuine intimacy requires, creating protective distance precisely when deeper bonding becomes possible. This self-protective mechanism operates beneath awareness. The person who seemed eager for connection suddenly discovers complications when real emotional intimacy emerges. Their unconscious calculates the vulnerability required for deep connection against the potential pain of eventual rejection or abandonment. Without conscious intervention, self-protection often prevails. Dating scenarios frequently demonstrate this dynamic. The relationship progresses smoothly through initial stages of mutual discovery and surface-level sharing. Both people express desire for meaningful connection. When emotional intimacy deepens, when real vulnerability enters the equation, one person begins emphasizing external barriers to commitment despite continued expressed interest. A typical scenario. After several promising weeks characterized by increasing emotional openness, one person begins emphasizing how busy their life is, how complicated their past relationships have been, or how uncertain their future plans are. These considerations weren't presented as obstacles during earlier stages, but emerge as intimacy deepens. The message is paradoxical. I want connection with you, but not too much. This pattern creates particular confusion because it contradicts expressed desires. The person creating distance often genuinely wants connection, but finds themselves overwhelmed by unconscious fears when that connection materializes. Their withdrawal isn't calculated deception, but unconscious self-protection, a pattern they themselves may not understand. Understanding this dynamic creates the possibility for genuine intimacy. When you recognize self-protective distancing as fear rather than rejection, you can respond with patience rather than pressure or withdrawal. By maintaining consistent presence without demanding reciprocal vulnerability before it's psychologically available, you establish yourself as someone who respects psychological boundaries while offering reliable connection, precisely the combination that allows genuine intimacy to develop at its own pace. Every time I start getting close to someone, I find myself pulling away or sabotaging things somehow. Perhaps the most perplexing psychological mechanism in relationships is unconscious self-sabotage, the tendency to create exactly the outcomes we consciously fear most. This pattern stems from a paradoxical aspect of human psychology. Familiar pain often feels safer than unfamiliar joy. When connection deepens beyond our emotional comfort zone, we may unconsciously create distance despite our conscious desire for closeness. This self-defeating mechanism operates beneath conscious intention. The person who repeatedly finds themselves pulling away just as relationships deepen isn't consciously choosing isolation. Rather, their unconscious is seeking the emotional landscape it knows how to navigate, even when that landscape causes suffering. Dating experiences often reveal these self-sabotaging patterns. Someone genuinely desires meaningful connection, yet finds themselves creating conflicts, finding fault, or becoming emotionally unavailable precisely when relationships show promise. These behaviors don't reflect their true assessment of the relationship, but their unconscious fear of unfamiliar emotional territory. Consider the common pattern. A relationship develops positively, showing real potential for meaningful connection. As intimacy deepens, one person begins focusing on minor incompatibilities, behaving inconsistently, or finding reasons why the relationship can't work. These concerns weren't significant during earlier stages, but suddenly become insurmountable as emotional vulnerability increases. What makes this pattern particularly destructive is its self-confirming nature. Each relationship that ends through these unconscious sabotage mechanisms reinforces the belief that meaningful connection is unattainable. This belief then justifies further protective measures in future relationships, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of approach and withdrawal. Understanding this dynamic creates the opportunity for breakthrough connection. When you recognize self-sabotaging patterns in yourself, you can consciously choose different responses despite emotional discomfort. When you recognize these patterns in others, you can maintain steady presence as they navigate their internal conflict between desire for connection and fear of vulnerability. The deeper understanding of these psychological mechanisms offers something more valuable than manipulation tactics. It provides the foundation for authentic connection. By recognizing how the unconscious mind shapes relationship patterns, you create the possibility of connection based on genuine compatibility rather than psychological reactivity. This perspective shifts the focus from trying to make someone fall in love with you to creating the conditions where authentic connection can flourish. The question transforms from, how can I make this person love me? To, how can I be present in ways that allow real connection to emerge if compatibility exists? This reframing doesn't guarantee universal attraction, but increases the likelihood of meaningful connection with compatible partners. The most powerful insight might be recognizing that lasting attraction relies less on superficial qualities and more on providing a psychologically safe environment for vulnerability. Someone who experiences you as emotionally reliable, capable of navigating conflict without disappearing, discussing uncomfortable topics without defensiveness, and offering consistent presence without demand, will often feel profound attraction that deepens rather than diminishes over time. This understanding doesn't guarantee perfect connection, but contextualizes relationship development within human psychological functioning. The person who disappears after initial attraction isn't necessarily rejecting your worth. They're often unconsciously protecting themselves from vulnerability. They're not psychologically prepared to experience. The freedom in this perspective comes from recognizing that meaningful connection, particularly when it develops into lasting love, rarely depends on performance or perfection. It more often emerges from creating psychological safety through consistency, emotional responsiveness, and respectful boundaries, qualities that allow the unconscious mind to gradually trust the unfamiliar territory of secure attachment. This insight doesn't eliminate the pain of rejection, but transforms its meaning. Disconnection becomes less a judgment of personal value and more a reflection of psychological compatibility at a specific moment in time. This perspective preserves self-worth amid disappointment, allowing forward movement without the burden of unwarranted self-criticism. The ultimate wisdom in understanding these psychological mechanisms isn't in manipulating others' feelings, but in creating the conditions where authentic connection can flourish. This awareness creates space for compassion, both for those navigating their own unconscious fears of intimacy and for ourselves when facing the vulnerability that meaningful connection requires. The ghosting phenomenon, when viewed through this psychological lens, becomes less a personal rejection and more an opportunity for deeper self-understanding. When someone disappears after apparent connection, the question worth asking isn't, "What did I do wrong?" but what psychological dynamics might have been operating beneath the surface. This perspective doesn't eliminate disappointment, but transforms it from evidence of personal inadequacy to information about relational patterns. This reframing preserves the core of self-worth that rejection often erodes, allowing forward movement without the weight of unexamined self-doubt. The greatest freedom might be recognizing that connection requires psychological compatibility, not just in interests or values, but in capacity for vulnerability and intimacy at a particular point in time. When this fundamental compatibility exists, connection often develops naturally, without manipulation or strategy. When it's absent, no technique will create lasting intimacy. Understanding this reality doesn't guarantee finding perfect connection, but it does protect against the soul-eroding belief that connection equals performance. Some minds naturally resonate, others naturally don't. This isn't personal failure, but psychological reality, a perspective that liberates from the burden of universal likability. The next time connection develops or dissolves, consider the unconscious mechanisms that might be operating beneath the surface. This perspective doesn't eliminate the mystery of attraction, but contextualizes it within psychological patterns that shape all human experience. The secret to making someone fall deeply in love isn't found in manipulation tactics, but in creating the psychological safety that allows their own capacity for love to emerge naturally. This understanding offers something more valuable than techniques for manufacturing attraction. It provides insight into creating the conditions where authentic connection can flourish. The freedom in this perspective comes from recognizing that meaningful relationship doesn't require perfect strategy, but consistent psychological presence. Being emotionally responsive, respectfully boundaried, and authentically engaged. In a dating landscape where superficial connection often gives way to unexplained disappearance, understanding these psychological mechanisms provides a crucial shield against the erosion of self-worth. The person who ghosts after apparent connection demonstrates limited capacity for navigating the vulnerability intimacy requires, limitations that would eventually constrain relationship depth, regardless of how promising the beginning seemed. This perspective transforms ghosting from personal rejection to psychological information, valuable data about compatibility rather than damning evidence of inadequacy. This reframing doesn't eliminate disappointment, but reduces its power to diminish self-perception. The question becomes not, why wasn't I enough? But, what does this reveal about what we both need in connection? The greatest wisdom might be recognizing that the very qualities that create lasting love, emotional reliability, capacity for vulnerability, consistent presence, cannot be performatively manufactured, but must be authentically embodied. The secret to making someone fall deeply in love isn't found in external techniques, but in developing your own capacity for meaningful connection. What appears as the secret to creating love is actually the practice of creating the psychological conditions where love can naturally emerge when compatibility exists. This isn't manipulation, but invitation, offering the rare gift of consistent presence in a world where emotional reliability has become increasingly scarce. The freedom lies not in making anyone fall in love with you, but in becoming someone capable of the vulnerability, consistency, and emotional responsiveness that meaningful connection requires.